think it's on. Good evening. Couldn't remember if it was evening or what it was. This is my Wednesday night Bible study. My name is Douglas Griffin. Today's date, February 15th, 2023. We are going through the book of John, verse by verse. We're in John chapter 13. Last 24 hours or so of the life of Christ. But John has 10 more chapters because he's going to document every minute because he feels like that's where all the important lessons were. And I feel the same way. If you only have 24 hours left, what are the most important things that Jesus is like, I need to get this across to you? And so John spends a lot of time on it. So they are at the Last Supper. It is not the Passover supper. That's going to happen the next night, which involves a Passover lamb, and Jesus is the Passover lamb. So at the end of this night, well, and then the next day, which is still the same day, on the 14th, so it's the 13th right now, on the 14th, starting at night up to the next day, by the end of that day, he'll be sacrificed on the cross at the same time that the lambs are being sacrificed in the temple. And then his blood is shed, their blood is shed, and everybody's supposed to go, oh, I see the correlation. So God spent all that time setting that up, saying, please see the correlation here, please. So just reminding you in John chapter 13, verse 2, it says, and supper being ended. Now here's that's it. That's literally not, that's not what it literally says. It says, while it was becoming supper, would have been the better time. We know that supper wasn't ended because later on he's passing out wine and then he's passing out the bread. So I don't know why that's so weird. Anyway, so while it was becoming supper is more literally what's going on. This is toward the beginning of the meal. They had just come from outside. They're lying down at the table. The table's on the floor, as it is in everyone's houses. They didn't have chairs. You lean on one elbow. You're on your left side. You lean on your left side, left elbow. Your right hand's free to eat and pass food. Their feet are away from the table. Their elbows are toward the table, and so they're like that all around, right? Just like a big flower, all around. Feet spread out away from the table. Elbows all toward the table. 6 on one side, 6 on the other, except for Jesus. I guess he made it 7 on one side and 6 on the other. So they all came in. No one had taken the time. Normally a servant shows up and washes everybody's feet. No servant had done that. And so now the disciples took it upon themselves to do it. They're still jockeying for position. Here's what's really interesting, that Judas is on the other side of Jesus. Peter's across from him. So on this big, long table, wide table, Peter's directly across from Jesus. John is right in front of him. Judas is right behind Jesus. So it says in John chapter 13, verse 5, after that, he poured water into a basin. So just reminding us that Jesus got up and he girded himself. He took a towel and he took off his cloak. He still has on his tunic, kind of hiked up his cloak and put a towel around him so that he could wash everybody's feet and dry them off. So after he's gotten the towel ready, John chapter 13, verse 5 says, after that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet. So after he girded himself, etc. I'm just checking something. Oh, good. Okay. Making sure. And he wiped them with the towel with which he was girded. Right? So I've got this towel. Like a waiter might have a restaurant, a towel here, and I'm just putting then I put it back. Then he came to Simon Peter. So Jesus, again, John is on one side, Judas is on the other. Either he started with Judas and went around the table, and then we got to Peter. Peter said something. So 6 disciples in a row had said nothing. Peter has to speak up. Or he started with John and went counterclockwise and got to Peter. I think he started with, this is my opinion, but I wasn't saying that who he started with, but John and Judas are on either side of them. I think he started with John, got to Peter, and then ended with Judas because of what he says at the end of when he's washing feet. So he starts with John. He's washing everybody's feet. He's going around. He gets to six people. He gets to number six of the disciples, and it's Peter, who was directly across from him, right? So, verse 6 of John chapter 13. Then he came to Simon Peter, and Peter said to him, Lord, are you washing my feet? Duh. Now, no one had said anything, and I understand Peter's shock because one of the lesser disciples should have been doing it. Why are you doing it? Lord, are you washing my feet? So this is Peter like to correct Jesus because he wasn't saying this like he didn't know what was going on. Oh, I just had now noticed. He's saying, what, are you washing what are you doing? Because Peter loved to correct Jesus. For example, Matthew chapter 16, verse 21. It says, from that time, Jesus began to show to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed and be raised the third day. So there was a certain halfway through his ministry, maybe 2 years into the 3 years. He's talking about now is the suffering part. And we have to go to Jerusalem. I'm going to be killed. It says in verse 22 of Matthew 16, then Peter took him aside because he wanted to embarrass Jesus in front of everybody. Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, far be it from you, Lord, this shall not happen to you. Like, snap out of it. Like a scene from when Cher slapped, it wasn't Nick Nolte. But anyway, Moonstruck, right? Snap out of it, Jesus. Far be it from you, Lord, that this shall not happen to you. So Peter liked to correct Jesus when he was and we like to correct God. Come on, God, why you shouldn't have let that happen? That's wrong. Because we know better than God and what God should be doing. And so, Lord, why did you messed up, God? Well, no, I didn't. You just had the wrong expectation. In Matthew chapter 3, this isn't Peter, this is John, and God is all about symmetry, interestingly enough, and because he wants to create patterns that will recognize, so he does it whatever way he can. John points it out. Well, but in Matthew chapter 3, verse 14, Jesus' ministry is just starting, and this is actually 6 months before he got to Jerusalem, but this is the beginning of his ministry. So again, the ministry was 3.5 years long, but the first 6 months were just up in Galilee. It was 6 months before he came to Jerusalem. It's like if you're watching Jesus, the miniseries, The Chosen, it's the second season, now the third, before he finally gets to the Beatitudes. Because there's a long period of time before Jesus ever got to Jerusalem and started his ministry. So 6 months have gone by. So this is the very beginning of that 6-month period. It says, Jesus came from Galilee to John at the Jordan to be baptized. And John tried to prevent him, saying, I need to be baptized by you. Are you coming to me? So there's a picture of this water baptism, right? And water baptism represents this total immersion into God, it's like a burial. My old self being buried and I'm being totally baptized, immersed. So it starts with water, and then on that last night, it ends with water. He's explaining the baptism, because then he went and baptized all his disciples. Anyway, so Jesus, verse 15, but Jesus answered and said to him, permit it to be so now, for thus it is fitting for us to fulfill all righteousness. Then he allowed him, like, this is what we're supposed to do, get baptized. And so he brought the disciples and he baptized them. And at that point, they're clean. Now he's having to wash their feet. And he's using this as an object lesson. So his ministry begins with water, basically, being totally baptized, but it ended with him washing the feet of the disciples. So John chapter 13, verse 7. So Jesus answered and said to Peter, what I am doing you do not understand now, but you will know after this. Your translation might say afterwards. This word means immediately, like soon, like in the next hour or the next day. which is contrasting to a different word in John chapter 13, same chapter, but verse 36. Simon Peter says to Jesus, Lord, where are you going? And Jesus answered him, where I'm going, you cannot follow me now, but you shall follow me afterwards. And he doesn't mean immediately afterwards, like I'm going to the cross and the next day you're going to be dead. He's saying much later, you're going to follow me there. We're going to follow Jesus. He went to heaven. We're all going to follow him there, all of us who are believers. So that means a long time from now. But this one, when he says, but this you'll know after this, in verse 7, he means really soon. If you just shut up for a minute, give me a minute, I will explain it all to you and you'll get it soon. So John chapter 13, verse 8. So Peter said to him, well, you shall never wash my feet. So that's funny. I'm sorry. Jesus says, what I'm doing, you don't get. Well, I get it enough to say you ain't going to do it. So interesting. What I'm doing now, you don't understand, but you'll understand too. Well, you're not. Well, I may not understand. I don't know nothing about all that, but I do know you will never wash my feet. So Jesus answered him and said, if I do not wash you, then you'll have no part with me. So what does he mean by that? And it's so, well, the context lets us know, and if you read before, but read after, if I do not wash you, you won't have any part with me. It's a similar concept in Deuteronomy chapter 10. And they're talking about the tribe of Levi in verse 8. He says, at that time, the Lord separated the tribe of Levi to bear the ark of the covenant of the Lord, to stand before the Lord, to minister to him, and to bless his name to this day. So there were 12 tribes, just like there are 12 disciples, but he took one tribe and separated them. And they were going to have a whole different type of way that they got blessed. He says, therefore, verse 9, Levi has no portion. When Jesus said to Peter, if I don't wash your feet, you'll have no portion with me. You'll have no part with me. You won't be able to share in this. He says, so Levi has no portion nor inheritance with his brethren. They're still his brethren. It's not like they're no longer his brethren. He says, the Lord is his inheritance, just as the Lord your God promised him. So where God gave them the land to the 12 tribes, he said, you won't get the same blessing from the land that they will. I'm going to bless them. This is the land of milk and honey, flowing with grapes, and it's going to, everywhere they put their hand to plow. And so the olive tree and the fig tree, and I'm going to bless them this way. You won't get blessed that way. I'm separating from you. That from you. So you'll have no portion. You won't get the same sort of blessing. You'll still be their brother, and this is important to understand, but you just won't get, you're going to have to get your blessing a different way. In Deuteronomy chapter 12, same concept, same words, Deuteronomy 12:11, says, then there will be the place where the Lord your God chooses to make his name abide, talking about his temple. There you shall bring all that I command you, your burnt offerings, your sacrifices, your tithes, the heave offerings of your land, and all your choice offerings which you vow to the Lord. You'll bring them to the temple. You'll eat them. You'll share them out, and they're bringing of their abundance that they've gotten from the land. Your heave offerings means your grain, and that you've grown, and they throw it up to the Lord as symbolically saying it's yours. Now, God didn't catch it, and it didn't hang in the air. It fell back down. It was just symbolic. This is yours, God, and they would catch it. And your burnt offerings, they were allowed to eat some of their burnt offerings and feast in it, but it was all from the produce and stuff that God had blessed them with. But he says, verse 12, and you shall rejoice before the Lord your God, you and your sons and your daughters, your male and female servants, and the Levite who is within your gates. So each tribe had their own section. Like you've got San Diego, you got Santa Barbara, you've got LA, you got Bakersfield, right? Everybody had their own section. The Levite had no section, but they were distributed all throughout. So you've got a Levite that lives with you. You got a priest that lives with you. Bring him with you along with your servants so he can share. He says, the Levite who's within your gates, since he has no portion. Remember, Jesus says, you'll have no portion with me. You'll have no part with me, no inheritance with you. So the concept is they're not blessed the same way. You're not going to get that same abundance. So he says to Peter, If I don't wash your feet, you won't have a portion. Your blessing will be cut short. You won't have that same blessing everybody else does. So I need to wash you. I need to wash your feet. And they're going to get the further lesson of this, and I'll explain what he means by that as we go. So John chapter 13, verse 9. So Simon Peter says to him, "Oh, well, Lord, then not my feet only, but also my hands and my head." Like if I want to have a portion, I want to get the same blessing. I don't want to be disconnected from you in any way. Doesn't mean he would no longer be a Christian. You're gonna mess up your source of blessing. You won't get the same blessing that you used to. You're going to be disconnected from me if I'm not able to wash your feet. Well, then wash everything. My hands, my head, which is, again, typical of Peter, just to jump in and keep correcting. But now here's what's interesting. You think, so why did God use Peter if he's so brash and for that reason? Like certain things that we see as a detriment to somebody, God sees as a plus. That's why he gave them that personality. It just has to be sanctified to him. So some people, they are more suspicious than others. They're not just quick to smile at everybody and look at everybody. But there's a reason. God has given them a kind of an internal thermometer, and they can, that person doesn't seem quite right, right? We might see it as a detriment, but if the gift is sanctified to the Lord, then the Lord will use that person. We'll look to them and go, so-and-so had a funny look when she ran into that person. Maybe I need to slow down, because as opposed to, why is she always so mean? Maybe there's a reason. The person who talks so much, like Peter, was always the first one to talk. Hey, God used that. Now he had to sanctify it, because Peter was quick to open his mouth before he thought. Peter, learn to think first and then talk, because that's your thing. You love to jump in. But you also love extremes. So you'll never wash my feet. Well, but okay, then you'll have no part with me. Okay, then wash everything. He'll go 1,000 miles the other way. Like in Luke chapter 5. Jesus had just been teaching, and Jesus picked Peter's boat to teach the crowd. He got out, because there's a huge crowd. He got out and sat in the boat in the water, and he taught the crowd. They're all standing, they're all watching Jesus while he's sitting in the boat. In Luke chapter 5, verse 4, it says, "And when he stopped speaking, he said to Simon Peter, launch out into the deep and let down your nets for a catch. But Simon answered and said to him, Master, we've toiled all night and caught nothing." Because I don't even know you yet, but I'm going to correct you. Nevertheless, okay, we'll do it. Which is the one good thing about Peter is, okay, well, I don't agree, but I'll jump in and do it. So nevertheless, at your word, I will let down the net. Now, he didn't think it was going to happen. He just, out of respect to you, I'm going to jump in and just do it. Okay, guys, we're going to go back out. They're going, what? Yes, we're all going back out, because this man said, go back out and let down your nets, even though there's no fish there. Verse 6, "And when they had done this, they caught a great number of fish, and their nets were breaking. So they signaled to their partners in the other boats to come and help them, and they came and filled both the boats, so they began to sink because there's so much fish. And when Simon Peter saw it, he fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, Depart from me, for I'm a sinful man. Oh, Lord, get away. I'm unclean. Get away. So just 30 seconds ago, sure, whatever you say. Get out of here. Leave me alone. Because Peter will go to an extreme in a second. For he and all who were with him were astonished at the catch of fish which they had taken, and so also were James and John, the sons of Zebedee. So Peter's there with his brother Andrew. James and John are there because they had like a fishing company. Their family was wealthy. The sons of Zebedee, who were partners with Simon. And Jesus said to Simon, Do not be afraid. From now on, you will catch men. Because you'll just jump out and do it, even though you don't even know what you're doing. At least you'll jump out and do it. So you're going to catch men. And Simon's like, what are you talking about? In Acts chapter 10, verse 13, a voice came to Peter while he's on the roof, because that's where they would go. It's like a balcony, like your balcony. He went on the roof because that's where they would go. They had a little couch, and a voice came to him, and he saw a vision. A sheet came down with a whole bunch of animals on it, some which the law had formerly said were unclean. a voice came to him, "Rise, Peter, kill and eat." But Peter said, "Not so, Lord," because he's going to argue with God. He's going to argue with a voice from heaven. "Not so, Lord, for I have never eaten anything common or unclean." So let me just correct you right there. And a voice spoke to him again the second time, "What God has cleansed, you must not call common or unclean," right? And this was done 3 times. 3 times he argued with him. And 3 times, "No, hello, I'm saying it's clean. Stop arguing with me. Just go for it like you do." And the object was taken up into heaven again. So Peter goes downstairs, and men show up and say, "Hey, there's a Roman guy who wants to talk to you." Peter's like, "Okay," because Peter I know he likes to argue a lot, but if it's unfamiliar or new, and he'll go, "Okay." And so he followed these guys to Caesarea and little Caesar's house, and there are Gentiles there, and so he's shocked. Then he said to him, "You know how unlawful it is for a Jewish man to keep company with or go to one of another nation? I'm not supposed to be in here. But I get it now. God has shown me that I should not call any man common or unclean." Because I remember he said I was going to make me fishers of men. And then he was showing me that these things are clean. And so now I get it. I get it. Okay, I'm not supposed to call anything common or unclean. And he goes for it. "Therefore I came without objection as soon as I was sent for. And I asked him, 'For what reason have you sent me? I don't even know why you sent me here.'" So, which is what Peter, "I don't even know why I'm going. I'm just going." So he had that part of him. Yes, he'd like to argue, but he also had this curiosity factor, like, "Okay, if you say let down the nets, we'll go do it." Oh, I'm shocked. So that's why God liked to use Peter. He would eventually dive in, even if he didn't know what he was talking about. Once he shut his mouth and stopped arguing, he would go, "Okay." And he was the first one to preach on the day of Pentecost. First one that, So if I can just teach Peter, he will go forward and he'll start preaching to the Gentiles, even if all the rest of the Jews refuse. So Jesus says to him, because remember he says, "You got to wash my whole body." I know I just said never, but watch the whole thing. So Jesus says to him, "He who is bathed need only to wash his feet, but is completely clean. And you are clean." So did I read this very first verse? Yes. "Supper being ended, the devil having already put it into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him." That's John chapter 13, verse 2. So John's setting it up that Jesus is sitting at a meal with the person who's about to betray him. So he wants to put in the context. That's why it's verse 2. Devil had already put it into Judas's heart. He was already planning. He's sitting there planning to do it. It's not like this. He came up with this after this meal. "Ooh, that beef was kind of tough. I think I'm going to betray Jesus." He had already knew he was going to do this. Jesus knows it. And yet he's breaking bread with him and doing all these things. This is an example of forgiveness that Jesus is demonstrating to them. "I'm going to wash everybody's feet here because I want you to know that I've forgiven you all." And foot washing is a type of forgiveness. I heard a minister say, and I can certainly agree with him in part of this, that Jesus was demonstrating service, not forgiveness. And the reason he's saying this is because he doesn't want us to think, "Oh, we're only 90% forgiven, and then we have to be forgiven every day, and now we're back to 100%. We are 100% clean." That's the point Jesus is making right now. Jesus died for every sin we're ever going to commit. So you're clean. If you believe, you're clean. But your feet come in contact with the world, and you need to be washed from that. Just from that incidental contact with the world. You have to be washed by that. So Jesus says to him, "He who is bathed," meaning you just took a bath, you're clean. You need only to wash your feet, because your feet's the only part that's going to get dirty after you get out of the bathtub. Your feet's going to get dirty. So every so often you're going to have to wash your feet. "He who confesses his sins, God is faithful and just to forgive his sins and cleanse him from all unrighteousness." So you're going to make mistakes. It's okay. Just come to me and say, "Oh, Lord, I messed up." You haven't lost your salvation. When Jesus says, "You'll have no portion with me," you still the Levites were still brothers. It's not like you're no longer brothers, but if you here's what he's projecting, and I just should have just said this from the beginning. They're about to betray Jesus also. They're about to deny him. They're, Judas is going to betray him. Peter's going to deny him. They're all going to leave him. They're all going to abandon him. 25 hours from now, well, less than 24 hours from now, you all have abandoned me. So I want you to know, you need to know I forgive you. I am doing this in advance. I am forgiving you in advance for the sin you're about to commit. I'm showing you this so that you'll be able to forgive yourself. So you won't be thinking later, oh no, we abandoned Jesus. Now he hates us. And, I'm doing this in advance. I'm washing your feet because every so often you're going to mess up. And so you need to say, oh Lord, I messed up. Oh Lord, please forgive me. And it's done. But you're still a brother. The Levites were still brothers. There's not that they weren't longer brothers. But if you allow that unforgiveness to set in, you are going to cut yourself off. You're going to cut yourself off from the source of your blessings because you're going to go into depression. You're going to say, oh, I messed up. I might as well just keep messing up. And Jesus hates me. And you're going to sabotage yourself. So you're going to mess up your portion with me, and you cut yourself off from the normal way that I want to bless you, because you won't be listening to my voice. You're just going to be listening to the devil tell you, oh, God hates you now. Oh, you messed up. You know, God, oh, you did that. Oh, and this is like, it's nothing. You are clean. Once you believe in me, you're clean. And if you happen to step in some mud, just wash off your feet and keep going. So this guy this minister I was just listening to him was like, it couldn't be about forgiveness but that's because he didn't want anybody to think you weren't 100% forgiven. We are 100% forgiven. But when we mess up, when we step in a little mud, go to Jesus and say, oh, Lord, I messed up. And you wash your feet and then you keep going. Because Jesus says you are clean. He was bathed, needs only to wash his feet because you're going to step in some mud every so often. But is completely clean. I want you to know you are completely clean. And you are clean. He says it twice, but it's completely clean, and you are clean. So I'm not saying you aren't clean. We're just getting rid of that little bitty incidental contact with the world. John 15:3, he says, you are already clean because of the word which I've spoken to you. You've already believed it. You're not clean because of your actions. There's nothing that you did. I'm going to do the action. So there's nothing you can do to take you out of my hand. There's nothing you do that got you into my hand. It was your faith. You believed in my word, and that saved you. So when you mess up, that doesn't unsave you. It just dirties your feet. Just clean them. But your faith is what saves you. God of your faith has made you whole. Jesus kept trying to emphasize that. So you're already clean because of the word, which I've spoken to you, and you've believed it, he sang through the disciples. Although at that time, Judas is not there. Judas has already left. In Ezekiel chapter 36, verse 25, it says, then I will sprinkle clean water on you, and you shall be clean. I will cleanse you from all your filthiness and from all your idols, all, not just 90% of it, which is what this minister was trying to emphasize. I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit within you. I will take the heart of stone out of your flesh and give you a heart of flesh. We were talking about some people's hearts are stone and the sun, they're like clay and it hardens. Or they're like wax and they melt. But that choice is always ours. But if you, as soon as you reach your hand out toward me, just a little bit, done. New heart, you're done, you're clean. In Hebrews chapter 10, verse 22, let us draw near with a true heart in full assurance of faith, having our hearts sprinkled from an evil conscience and our bodies washed with pure water. And that's the concept. You're totally clean, you've been bathed. So he says, he who is bathed needs only to wash his feet, but is completely clean. And he turns to the group and says, you are clean. Now he's going he started with John, in my opinion. He went on, got to Peter. Peter stopped him and said, oh Lord, da, da, da. And so he's talking to Peter, but he's continuing, right? So he's finally back to where, you'll see that he's back to where he started. So he says, you are clean, but not all of you. Because it was already in his heart to betray Jesus. Judas had already let that go this man is a traitor to the faith. All these thoughts are going through Judas's mind. I thought Jesus was going to come and he was going to destroy the Romans, but now it is clear he is saying tomorrow he's going to be crucified. Judas got it and John got it. The rest of the group were lost, but Judas got it. And he was horrified. That's the worst thing that can happen. Jesus going to the cross, that this man's just going to give himself over to the Romans. I'm going to turn him in and I'm going to force him to fight. I'm going to betray. They're going to take him off. And then, because Judas had seen him raise the dead. Judas had been there when he walked on water. Judas knew what this man could do. Use your power to bring down the Romans. So I totally disagree with you, just like Peter does, but I just don't say it out loud. You will not go to the cross if I have anything to do with it. In fact, I'll hasten that. I'm going to sick the Romans on you because he didn't know how it was going to happen. Judas didn't know that he would be the very instrument used. He just thought Jesus was going to, I guess, just walk up to a cross and get on it or something. So let me force him. I'm going to force him into some action. In 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 21, it says, "For it would have been better for them not to have known the way of righteousness." So there are certain people who, once you've heard this scripture, once they actually know the truth, and they, not somebody who kind of heard about Jesus and they got saved, but they're like the seed where the devil immediately came up and ate it or grew up with weeds. They were never fully planted. These are talking about the people who've known the word. They have seen miracles. They prayed for people. They know what they're doing. When that person turns away, their heart won't turn back. It's not that God doesn't want them back, but that person knows what they're giving up. If you know what you're giving up, nothing can change your mind back. If you didn't know, if you got saved, but then something happened and I'm not going to go to church anymore. Remember, God can woo you back because you're like a kid, you didn't know. But an adult who knows, it says, it would have been better for them not to have known the way of righteousness than having known it intimately to turn from the holy commandment delivered to them. But it has happened to them according to the true proverb. This is 2 Peter 2. And Peter is kind of talking about Judas. It's like the true proverb, a dog returns to his own vomit. Why is that? I don't know. And a sow or pig, having washed, to her wallowing in the mire. She returned to it like, I'm clean, but I sure can't wait to get back in that mud. And so, and because that's where they feel more comfortable. So it's better that you didn't know and really know and then turn your back on it, which is what Judas is about to do. So Jesus, he washes his feet last, I believe, as opposed to washing John's feet last, because as a choreographer, that would make more sense to me. And then go up to Judas, you be the last one instead of starting with Judas, and say, you're all clean, but not all of you. Bum, bum, bum. And he's right at Judas, right? And it says in the next verse, John chapter 13, verse 11, "For he knew who would betray him, therefore he said, you are not all clean." So I'm thinking he would say that at Judas. Then he gets back into his spot in between John and Judas because he's done. He went around, washed all their feet. Now he's back. So he either started with Judas or ended with Judas. So when he washed their feet, taken his garments and sat down again, right? So that was the last thing he said, probably to Judas and not to John. He sat down again and he said to them, "Do you know what I have done to you? Do you get it? That was a visual example. Do you understand why I did it and what I was doing?" He says, "You call me teacher and Lord, and you say, well, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet." So this particular minister was saying, that's about service. We should wash another's feet. I believe he's saying, and that's true. It's not like that's not true, but I think he's saying you need to forgive one another. People are going to frustrate you. They're going to challenge you. They're going to say all manner of evil against you. You have to forgive one another. So you're all clean from your sin, and now I'm cleaning your feet. Those little tiny grievances that happen, I'm cleaning them. So the washing is a type of cleansing away sin. It's not a type of cleansing away servitude or something. So I just don't agree with this particular teacher. I think he's talking about forgiveness. So you need to wash one another's feet. You have to forgive one another, just the way I am doing this for you. For I've given you an example that you should do as I have done to you. Most assuredly, I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is he who is sent greater than he who sent him. And if you know these things, blessed are you if you do them. And so they will marvel later. Wow, he knew Judas was going to betray him, and yet he broke bread with him. He gave him wine. He washed his feet. I don't think that's a type of serving Judas. I think that's a type of forgiving Judas. Like, I'm still loving this person, even though they're just about to turn me into the Roman authorities. And I want you to have the same example. Now, then he says, John chapter 13, verse 18. Now, I do not speak concerning all of you. I know who I'm chosen. So I'm clear that one of you is not going to take this to heart, and your anger is going to drive you to do something horrible. But the rest of you, and he says, I know who I'm chosen, so I'm not dumb. In John chapter 6, verse 70, it says, Jesus answered them and said, did I not choose you, the 12, and one of you is a devil? And again, they went, what you talking about? And verse 71 says, he spoke of Judas Iscariot. This is John, the son of Simon, for it was he who would betray him, being one of the 12. So they didn't get it. They just thought, Jesus is speaking in hyperbole. But he says, I get it. And one of you is going to be the one to betray me. But I'm still going to teach you. I'm still going to do all that I can. This person, I'm going to do what I can to save their life. God chose to give us all free will. I could argue with him, but everything that we do must be our choice. God doesn't ever make us do anything. Even if he knows what you're going to do, he gives us the tools and capabilities to not do it. Jesus preached to Judas every day, showed him miracles, loved him, forgave him. But I know you're going to betray me. But it'll be your choice. It won't be because I didn't do anything other than love you to the end. John 13, verse 18, the second part of it says, but that the scripture may be fulfilled. He who eats bread with me has lifted up his heel against me. So this is all happening so that the scriptures be fulfilled. David already saw this happening. And I need us to be clear that David often had visions of the life of Christ and would talk about it. And it wasn't his actual life, or sometimes there was something similar happening in his life, but prophecy was coming out of his mouth, especially on the way up Mount Moriah, which is the same, when he was taking the same path to the cross, that Jesus took it to the cross. David was taking it up to the top of Mount Moriah. He does the 22nd Psalm and says, oh, all my bones are broken, and they laugh at me. And he describes the crucifixion, even though he wasn't being crucified and the crucifixion didn't even exist at that time. He's having this vision up, and then the 22nd Psalm comes out of his mouth, and he says, my God, when he sees what's going on, why have you forsaken me? That's David's reaction to what he's seeing. But everybody knew that was a messianic psalm. So Jesus quotes that psalm. My God, why has thou forsaken me? So that they would go, oh, that's right. That's the psalm where he was describing crucifixion. It wasn't Jesus panic like, what happened, God? I don't get it. That's not what was going on. He's quoting scriptures. So they'll all go, oh, he's quoting that messianic psalm. And maybe somebody else will get saved. So Jesus never stops witnessing to them. So David had this psalm come out of his mouth, Psalm 41:9, where he says, even my own familiar friend in whom I trusted, who ate my bread, has lifted up his heel against me. Jesus just quotes the last part and says, who I ate my bread with has lifted up his heel against me. He doesn't quote the first part, which says, even my own familiar friend in whom I'm trusted, because David was talking about his own specific friend that had betrayed him. That I'll get to in just a second. John 2, verse 24, he says, but Jesus did not commit himself to them because he knew all men. So The crowds were coming after him. We love you. We love you. And Jesus is like, whatever. Let me go and hide from these people who are going to be saying crucify him in about 3 years. So he knew men. He got men. So Jesus would never have said, I trusted you to Judas, because he knew what Judas was going to do from the beginning. I already know. But I'm still going to love you, and I'm going to give you every opportunity to repent and not do it. David was the one who was shocked and said, even my own familiar friend whom I trusted, that was David talking about his situation. Then he says, who ate my bread has lifted up his heel against me. Who was he talking about? And then I just must tell these stories. I want to tell them in a memorable way because there's like 500 Bible stories. But if I can make them memorable, then maybe we can remember and separate them. When we run into these names later, we'll go, oh yeah, that's the guy who. Okay, so David's friend who he ate bread with, who he trusted, his name was Ahithophel. Ahitho, Phel, Phel. Ahithophel. Okay. So, 2 Samuel chapter 15, verse 31. Then someone told David, saying, Ahithophel is among the conspirators with Absalom. This is during the time period when Absalom had decided he was going to kill his father and take over Jerusalem. And David felt so hurt, he just left Jerusalem with his group of people. And that's when he's walking up Mount Moriah. And then he has this vision of this crucifixion, of being portrayed, of him being pierced and the blood being poured out. Oh my God, why have you forsaken me? But God hadn't forsaken him. God was going to rescue David. But how he felt at that time is like, oh my God, my own son is going to kill me. So someone told David, 2 Samuel chapter 15, 31, that saying, Ahithophel is among the conspirator with Absalom. And David said, oh Lord, I pray, turn the counsel of Ahithophel into foolishness. Because Ahithophel was the best war general strategist ever. And David trusted him on how to win all of his wars. And suddenly he's advising Absalom. It's like, we're sunk. So whatever he tells Absalom, make it foolishness. In 2 Samuel chapter 16, verse 23, it says, now the advice of Ahithophel, which he gave in those days, was as if one had inquired at the oracle of God. So was all the advice of Ahithophel, both with David and with Absalom. So God wasn't making Ahithophel suddenly say crazy stuff, because that was his gift. God doesn't take the gifts and callings of God without repentance. So Ahithophel gave him brilliant advice. But fortunately, this other guy said, I don't know, don't listen to him. What we should do is this. And everybody said, yeah, that sounds right. And they didn't listen to Ahithophel. So God didn't have to make Ahithophel suddenly crazy and babbling. He just knew, he folded his arms. I know that crazy person over there is going to speak up and say something stupid. And he did. So Ahithophel said, let's take men right now. And, okay, I'll read what he says. 2 Samuel chapter 17, verse 1 says, moreover, Ahithophel said to Absalom, now let me choose 12,000 men, and I will arise and pursue David tonight while he's weak. Let's get him tonight. I will come upon him while he is, why don't I just read the scriptures? I will come upon him while he is weary and weak and make him afraid. And all the people who are with him will flee, and I will strike only the king. Then I will bring back all the people to you. And when all return except the man whom you seek, all the people will be at peace. So I know if I take 12,000 people and go right now, and because I know where David is, because I'm the one who told him to go there. Everybody with David will run, they will scream, they will flee, David will be left by himself, and I'll bring him back to you. We'll kill him, and then all those people will come to you. You won't have all these injured, weak, broken people. They'll just come to you. Fortunately, this other guy said, nah, just wait. Wait until you get more people. 12,000 is not enough. And it was enough time for David to get away. And David ended up getting a whole bunch of people. And Absalom didn't even come after him. It's like, oh, we screwed up. We should have got him while we had the chance. We only had that small number of people. Because now everybody's on David's side. And they didn't. So, but David felt betrayed that his best friend, the friend who had counseled him, was with him. Why did Ahithophel suddenly hate David? Turns out it wasn't suddenly. He was been mad at David for a long time. There are hints in scripture. So when you read 2 Samuel chapter 23, verse 34, it says, Eliphalet, who's the son of Ahasbai, okay, so never have to remember those names, the son of the Mahachite, then it lists a third person. It says Eliam, the son of Ahithophel. So who's Eliam, or Eliam, the son of Ahithophel? So Ahithophel has a son, Eliam. Who is Eliam? If you go back to the beginning of 2 Samuel chapter 11, right? So that was 2 Samuel chapter 23. Go back to 2 Samuel chapter 11, verse 3. It says, so David sent and inquired about the woman, and someone said, is not this Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite? So Ahithophel's son is Eliam, and Eliam's daughter is Bathsheba. And Ahithophel knows that David had that son killed, and then David took his granddaughter. He's been mad with him for years. So once he saw that Absalom could take David, I'm going to go on your side. So Bathsheba is his granddaughter, whom, as far as Ahithophel is concerned, David defrauded and stole her. And so he wants him dead. Anyway, it broke David's heart because David's surprised, but Jesus was not surprised at anything Judas was going to do, what he wanted to do. But he wanted to show everybody, see how I still loved him. See how I forgave him. See how I'm washing your feet. You're all going to do the same thing. But just know, I want you to know so the devil can't get in your brain and say, oh, God's mad at you. And there's somebody listening tonight that needs to know that same thing. The devil's in your brain saying, oh, God's mad at you. Can't believe it that you did. All the sins have been forgiven. This one little thing you did is just like stepping in a little bit of mud. You are clean. Just go, Lord, wash my feet. Done. But you didn't stop being a brother at that point, just like the Levites didn't stop being a brother. It's not like, oh, you stepped in mud, so God, you're not saved anymore. We're saved because Jesus has died for every sin we've ever committed. It is the fact that we do something dumb like that that gets in our brain, and where the devil gets to your mind and say, oh, look what you just did. Ooh, God's mad at you. You better watch out. He's saying all you have to do is remember, I'm here to wash your feet. As soon as you just say, hey, oh my God, I messed up. Boom, done. Don't let the devil make you crazy. Because you are still saved. He says, you're still clean. You're clean. If somebody's gotten about that, you're clean. And if that little sin's going to trip you up, just confess it. Just say, oh, I'm sorry, I missed it. Done. Your feet washed. Now you can feel like you're back in fellowship. You were always still a brother, but now the devil has no place to eat at your brain. And that's what David's saying to all the disciples. That's what Jesus is saying to all the disciples. In fact, and this is the last verse, John chapter 13, verse 19, he says, now I tell you before it comes. Before what comes? Like what's about to happen? You're going to all mess up. Trust me. Now I'm telling you before it comes that when it does come to pass, you may believe that I am he. So I'm telling you in advance, I'm showing you in advance how much I love you and how I'm forgiving you so that when it happens, you will know I have forgiven you and it's all okay. Okay. So I'm going to end there. I thank you, as always, for listening in. And I bet there's some good questions here. I'll get back to all of them. Rodney, Denise, enjoy. All you guys give good questions, make good comments. And for those of you who are able, on Sundays, I'm in the book of Exodus. We started in Genesis. We're now in Exodus chapter 21, going forward from there. And hopefully you'll find that just as interesting. If not, I'll see the rest of you on Wednesday next week. All right. Thank you so much for tuning in. All right. Bye-bye.